Welcome to another episode of Spark. Today's guest is Daniel Buschmann. Daniel has founded multiple companies and has a deep knowledge in sales, which he currently uses to build Koyos.io. Koyos offers sales training, but Daniel is not your typical sales guy. What I really enjoyed about our conversation is how normal and down to earth Daniel and his approach are. This episode will be perfect for everyone looking to get into the sales game, including me. All right, Daniel, great to have you on the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
So during preparation, I found out that you actually are holder of a patent.
Oh, I actually am, yeah.
So could you tell us a little bit about Verschiebevorrichtungen zum Längsverschieben eines Sitzvorderteil eines Kraftfahrzeugsitzes?
Yeah, well, I can do that. Yeah, so actually, when I did my bachelor's degree, so it was in automotive engineering basically, and I did my final thesis at Porsche in a very small department, basically called Vorentwicklung. So basically everything that happens before the development of the real production cars. We were developing like prototypes for stuff to figure out whether there's some improvement possible in certain components. And what I did in the thesis was to evaluate one component of a seat, of one of their seat line and multiple seats. And basically one of the components I developed, or basically the concept for that was patented, was a mixture of very basic components to change a component that otherwise would be very expensive and also heavy. So we patented it in the end. So that's like my journey into becoming an inventor, which always had been like my goal from being like very young. I wanted to be an inventor, and that like concluded that chapter, so to say.
So basically you have the builder's gene inside of you.
Well, sort of. I don't know if it's the gene or just like how I grew up, like with stuff being possible. Also, like my dad being an engineer and like showing me stuff and building stuff with me. So yeah, that was like the journey that I took.
I think I remember that roughly during that time, the stock from Porsche like went up. So
I'm not sure. There was an interesting situation. I guess it's a year before that, when I also was there for an internship, because they were trying to take over VW, and there was this stock option thing going on. Very interesting, very complicated, and they almost managed to take over that very big corporate. So not sure if everything there was like quite legit, but it was interesting at that time to hear people talking about that.
Yeah. And then afterwards, what did you do?
So actually, when I was finishing my thesis, then I had the feeling that I wanted to found a company already. I had that spark earlier, so to do something there. I didn't feel like that I was capable of doing that at that time. I had like some ideas, but like no clue on how actually to build a company. And so I decided against it and took on an opportunity in Munich. Where I worked for a company for BMW, basically also as an engineer, as a testing engineer in the automotive segment, and moved to Munich and started my career there as an engineer instead of founding my first company right away.
So basically you had the wish to found since when? Since being a child, or?
Actually, yes. So there was when I was a child, I somehow got my hands on a book. It was basically a child's version of a book about financial freedom. It's a German book called Ein Hund namens Money, so a dog named Money. Okay. And it's like this dog that somehow got very experienced in like how to deal financially with a lot of stuff. And it's very easy to read. It's for children. I guess I was like 11 years old or 12 maybe when I read that. and that was interesting. And then like after that, it sparked the wish somehow to do something. I don't know if that came from the wish of like being financially independent, or if there was something else that sparked it. But yeah, I guess a few weeks later, I was setting up like a delivery service, getting stuff from the bakery and delivering it around our house to neighbors, asking them what they wanted for breakfast, and then on Saturday and Sunday, like going there with a bunch of kids, fetching that stuff and delivering it. That was like my first step or journey
Your
into
first startup.
like being an entrepreneur. Probably not startup. I mean, it lasted, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 weeks that we did that, and like earned, I don't know, maybe 10 DM Deutsche Mark at this time. So yeah, but it was like the first thing where I experienced how it is, and to manage all these kids, like because everyone wanted to come with us to do this tour, and so yeah, it was kind of a fun thing, and the first experience, so to say. That I had there. There was one later where I also feel like this contributed to that wish of being an entrepreneur. We had a type of a project in a class, I guess 9th and 10th grade, where we were setting up like a junior company in a somewhat safe setting, but like real clients that we were targeting. We had like a marketing agency at that time. We were thinking about doing the first websites, but no one actually was capable of doing that. So I ended up designing a lot of flyers and business cards and all of that stuff.
What kind of school was that?
Like a normal,
Yeah, this sounds amazing, because 2 days ago we did a podcast with Helmut Schönberger from Unternehmertum. And we're also talking about like school education and if there is something also to be done in German schools that people get in touch earlier with entrepreneurship. So this is amazing.
Yeah, it really, I also liked it a lot. It's called Junior Unternehmen, from the IW, the Institute for basically Economy in Germany. I also do a lot of research on like money and stuff like that. And I guess it was a great project because they stripped down all the complexity, like some bookkeeping stuff. We still had to do it. So there was actually someone from our team that did that, but on a very basic level. Like our salaries were like 60 and 70 cents. So this was like very low risk. We like gave out stock options in the beginning to family members that gave us like 10 years and stuff. So that was like a very solid concept on where everyone could start their company. I guess the only thing that I in the end didn't really like was that when it was finishing, it was just gone, because no one said, hey, this is a great thing you did there. Why not continuing that and pushing further? I guess this is what I feel was missing there with the program, to really encourage not to treat it as a project in school, but then to actually take it to the real world and continue doing that.
Yeah. Oh, this sounds amazing. I'm a little bit sad now that my school didn't offer those kinds of programs, but cool. There's one thing we have in common, which is that we're both managing more. I'm still a scholar, you're an alumni. How did that sort of play into your journey into becoming like a multiple times founder now?
Yeah, so as I said, after the bachelor, I wanted to found, but I had no clue. So I switched into like a corporate role as an engineer. Did that for 2-3 years. Had a lot of fun doing it actually. But what I was feeling that is missing is like, how can I actually like do something with my own ideas? How can I bring them to life? Because corporate life is very restricted. You are supposed basically to be an expert in one role. That's like why they would hire you and give you a job. And that limits also the ability to come up with new ideas and then to actually execute them. So like after a few years, I felt more and more the need to eventually figure out how to start a company. And as I still had no clue on how to do it, I felt like, hey, there must be something out there, some educational aspect that can support me on that journey and actually teach me that. And what I did then, I knew already that Managing More was a thing and that this program was out there. And then I found a study program in Munich, like a master's in management with a focus on innovation and entrepreneurship, which I felt like was at TUM, was one stepping stone in that direction. And then to together with the Manage More program, where I'm very happy to was part of it. So this was like the complete picture of like, let's call it enablement, entrepreneurial enablement.
Did you still like take something from the time that you were employed that helped you later on being a founder, or would you have rather wished to start earlier with entrepreneurship?
Yeah, that's a good thing. I guess, I mean, obviously what I've learned is valuable, but it does also limit maybe your thinking in a way because you got used to a certain environment. And I guess this hits a lot of, let's say, engineers or like similarly technical people, because like as an engineer, you're trained to look for things that break and fix them. So it's a very reactive approach on keeping things alive, but it's not an approach on like what can we start and put out there that might be crazy one day. And I guess that's something that's limiting a lot of people that coming from that space to some degree. So I would say that that's like a negative part where maybe less experience in that field would sometimes make it easier. But then obviously on the other part, so what you learn is like being extremely structured and like pushing also bigger projects. All these things are beneficial and can help there. But yeah, so it's a mixed bag with most of the things I feel, that you can take out of that.
I mean, you're at least a 3 times founder now. Can you take us a little bit through that journey and how you ended up at doing Koyos now, which is, a sales training company, basically. So can you tell us a little bit about that journey? And maybe also, I heard that you founded your first company within Manage More, maybe a little bit about your Manage More time and how that helped you sort of change your perspective on what you're able to do.
Yeah. So like shortly after joining Manage More, I wanted to take part in a TUM course, business plan basics seminar, where they teach you like how do you come up with a business plan and maybe early steps of validating a business, which I feel is really helpful. And so I took part, but did not have an idea yet on what to do. But there was another person from the Manage More program, and then like an evening before we had to decide on which topics we will work on during that course, he just gave me a call and said, "Hey, I'm dreaming of something like a space drink. So like what astronauts would have, like a very convenient, easy to use nutritional food that you can have, and it's very easy and very quick, and you basically need that." And I was hooked by the idea like right away, because I mean, we had the discussion earlier what I did have for breakfast and nothing, because it wasn't convenient this morning for me to create something. And so if I would had that product, it would have made it easier for me. And so actually I was hooked. We started working on that. And in the end, it was called Frühstück, was basically like a drink that could replace a breakfast, very nutritional, dense, so that it would actually take away your hunger that you will have or would have during the morning. Basically, most people by now, I would say, know Y-Food. Y-Food is, I guess, the biggest version of that, at least in Germany. They started, I guess, 1 or 2 years after we did. Basically, when we already had stopped because some things. And so that was like the first thing where we started.
I mean, I think there was Soylent back then.
Yes, that was also an interesting
Silicon Valley trend for a couple of months at least.
Yeah. And that was like, I mean, they were, I guess, in the news because they had like really bad at that point, like health standards or hygiene standards. So it was like mixed in a garage or something like that. I mean, so, but it's also, for me, it was surprising in that space that actually like the requirements for creating food or for the food itself are quite low, I felt at that time. Maybe I was also lacking some regulations, but the higher regulations is on the production facility and site. So when we like for prototyping purposes created some products, also we like could not sell them like in a right environment because like the production facility we used for that wasn't certified for that. But that goes like deep into like food production. But as you were also asking, like how did I mature over these experience? And I feel like the core was at the end we stopped because we did not have a team that was able to pull that off. So I guess for the 1.5 years we did that project or company, if you want to put it like that, we had so many changes in founding team because everyone had other obligations, still had to study or wanted to start a PhD, or so many clashes over like even just organizational things. Who's willing to put in the work to actually make this a company, which changed a lot and then makes it super hard to come up with a successful company. And that's the experience that I took to the next one or to the next company, because there was one person also from my generation of Manage and More having made the same experience in terms of can a team actually pull that off. And when we started talking about that, we realized, hey, we made this same experience, and do we want to see whether we are a great team before coming up with an idea and then starting to build a company? And we did that quite intensively. It's like not only on a, say, professional level, so figuring out, do we have skills that complement each other? Do we have a common ground in terms of values that we can rely on? But also like, can we go out and party together to like make it a nice environment in which we work? So, and I guess these aspects basically contributed to, being able to have a solid foundation of then founding the next company.
Which was Inospot, I guess.
Right. So Inospot is what we founded in the early 2017, but was also a tough way of getting there, because then obviously if you create the founding team first, the next big challenge is, what are you actually doing? And there's so many options. If like you combine like my background of management and engineering with his, like also business and informatics. So basically there's a huge field of what you could do. And then we tried to maintain this process of finding a good idea in a very structured way, which is a difficult part, right? So like our first ideation, I guess, brought up where we just threw ideas together that we had collected over the time, like 700 ideas somehow. And then it's like, what are we doing? We are not even a step closer to starting a company, because we have so many options of what we could do. Like most of them probably won't work, but what are the few that actually have a future maybe? And then we tried to break it down, and eventually we ended up with education as a topic we felt could provide the impact that we were looking for. And we dove into education. We went on trade fairs, talked to people, and then at some point figured out we do not have like any connection to education at this point, because I mean, we were not living in that. We had been in school, but that's like basically our education, and also studying. That was everything we knew about that, but nothing else. So could we have done something there? Maybe, but in the end we decided against it and looked elsewhere. And elsewhere meant like looking closer to the context that we were living in at this time, which was wanting to found a company. And we had this, or we saw that need, for example, for founders, that they were looking for certain programs, competitions, accelerators heavily at that time, because a lot of programs were arising. But it was very painful for the individual to look for these programs. And then once you found one, you realized, okay, the application deadline was gone already. So we knew there's like kind of a need that we could address, but had no idea what the actual business behind that was, because that's like very low value information, probably no one would really pay for. So it lacked on the business model part, I would say. And then like really out of like coincidence, I was on a bachelor's party, and then we sat together the next morning, and there was one guy working for a corporate, and he said, well, we do want to work with startups, but it's very hard of finding some that would be capable of actually working together with us. And that's when it clicked, and we realized, hey, by providing some information to startups on the one hand side, we can connect them to the right corporate partners to make a successful collaboration work. And maybe coming back a little bit to like what I really value, this invention thing. The startups have great inventions at some point and technology and all that stuff, but if you don't push it into a market, it's basically not worth anything. And by providing support for this collaboration of corporate with access to market and startups with really interesting technology, that was like a perfect fit from a topic side, and also what we could do, because then we could collect information about startups, which we eventually did more professionally with AI-based crawling in the web, to collect even more startups and find them before they actually were visible to anyone else, and then provide a platform where the corporates could find them in a very easy way to just start a partnership.
This is already a little bit in the direction of sales, I would say. Not directly, but sort of at least connecting business partners. Then after, I think, 4 years, right? You had an exit. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Yeah, well, I guess it took us 4 years throughout a lot of tough times, COVID, pandemic, and all that stuff. And then we had at some point started like conversation with the company in terms of, can we do a partnership? Because they were doing innovation management, and one component of managing innovation within a corporate is actually partnering externally. We always were talking about, like, can we make something happen? Can we do something together? And as of my experience with partnerships, if like not both parties have a very obvious incentive to start it, it never actually happens, and makes it very difficult to get it going. At least that was the case for us back then. And then like sometime later, we had like the contact person that we had there giving us a call and asking, hey, we are in a situation where we're starting to basically buy some companies to grow. They had a change in investors, and the new investors wanted to like go for a buy and build strategy. So not only improving internally, but also buying companies, also buying revenue to some degree, and doing that. And they asked us like if we would consider that of selling the company. And so, we thought about that and considered it. And then, basically process started quite fast, and we pushed it through, and then became part, as Inospot, part of the Hype group, and supporting our efforts there into the global solution that they had with all the reach to their clients and stuff like that.
Awesome. And now you're helping people do better sales.
That's right, yeah. I mean, when we were starting Inospot, we had no clue on how to sell. Basically, that's everything. Not selling to corporate, but not selling at all. Like none of us had like sold anything to anyone basically before, not on a proper scale.
Not a few Frühstücks.
Yeah, a few one, but like not on a scale that I would consider to be a proper sales experience. And so we had to figure out. And obviously we did make a lot of mistakes along the way. And once we realized that later that we could have needed a lot of support or some tips on how to actually do that, we would have been much faster and did less failure or experienced less failure than the way that we did it. And so was at some point doing Koyos was obvious that if we do training, we would go into the sales training space, because there is no formal education on how you do sales. There's a few maybe study programs that have it. So few ways of getting maybe some ideas on how to do it. Typically more marketing than sales, I feel. But no one teaches you like how to do modern sales other than obviously like sales training institutes or something like that. And these are typically like run by people that are doing coaching only. They're doing training only, but not people that do sales every day and are like trying themselves to become better every day and figuring out what the best things are that work in sales right now. Because in most of the software businesses, like you're competing globally from day one. And even if you have a great solution, there's probably a company out there having a similarly great solution. And if your sales is not working, you're not selling and your company is not working. So like even the greatest invention needs some sales to be successful. And to support that is like what we do now, like helping people to get up to speed in terms of sales, B2B sales specifically, faster, avoiding mistakes, and accomplishing basically their mission or company goals through being able to do proper sales.
What I really like about you, or at least about the way you appear to me, is that the usual, like, when you're online and you're like searching for sales training or whatever, you always feel like you're being scammed a little bit, you know? Like the sales guy's overdoing...
Get in the group.
Overdoing the sales game. Exactly. And what I really like about you is that you're this really like calm, really normal person who's not trying to sort of shove something in your face, but to do it sort of in the way that I, at least as a founder, would like to do it more just based on human interaction. I don't know how to explain this different, but like being a normal person at the same time a little bit.
Yeah. And I mean, that's a fear also that probably people have, because there's so many cliches about salespeople, and there's movies that are like fostering that, with Wolf of Wall Street, like maybe being one of them, where you have the feeling like I have to be that guy that just sells some shit to people and don't care about like if that is helpful for them, just to make money yourself. And I guess most of the companies today that are selling software, they are in a different reality. They are in a spot where they need to provide some value in order to sell, and that's a very consultative approach, I would say. That's also why you see that a lot of people at some point from consulting move over to sales, because it's in a way it's similar. You have to figure out what people need, and then you can provide a solution eventually. So and that's what people still, I feel, specifically in Germany, get wrong a lot of times, because they have this wrong cliche of like someone selling door to door in a very transactional way, trying to make a deal very fast. And most of the B2B sales is not working like that anymore, but the cliche is still there.
Really interesting. But for the listeners who are not that far along and sort of already like really thinking about sales, could you maybe explain what the sort of the rough difference between sales and marketing is, and so what exactly is sales?
So as I see it, you have like a big audience of people that would be potential clients, and they don't know you in the beginning. And what marketing does is like creating an awareness for your company, for your brand, maybe for your product. That's like the first part, and typically what most companies do, like awareness somehow. And the second part would be then sales, to actually close a deal and then sell a product or a service in the end. That's how I see the difference. Specifically in B2B, so if you're selling to businesses, that would be the case. Some B2C businesses, they can just rely on marketing, because basically everything is self-service, or you have like a wholesaler or whoever sells that. But for most of the business-to-business companies, so you have marketing to create awareness, either for someone buying a product, maybe also for employer branding reasons, to hire someone. And then also you have sales to close deals and then convince the client that your product is actually what they were looking for.
Okay, awesome. That's a very simple explanation. Let's now assume that I would be the owner of a hypothetic SaaS company. And I've built a great product. I have some first customers, maybe my, 2-3 pilot customers. And they love the product. But I want to get more customers, of course. And I have no plan how to do that. Where would you start?
Well, I mean, in that case, you started already. Because, I mean, the first clients is what is the most challenging. And I feel like really the very first client is, for most cases, it's so much harder than like the next 9. Because like you have no trust, you have no like references. So you have to create all that on your own. And if you were already able to do that by maybe talking to people that trusted you already before that, and they think you can pull it off and provide a great product, I mean, that's great. And then, you have done the first step and milestone there already.
And let's maybe go back even one step further. So I built a great product and I never talked to any potential customers. And I'm really convinced that my product is great because maybe I worked in the field, whatever. So I'm my first customer. And now I want to even get the first one.
Yeah. So, I mean,
it's not the best strategy probably to go about founding something, but I mean...
Yeah. That's what I would say. So how do you know your product's actually great? So let's consider you have been in the industry since a lot of years and you know that the product is what the market needs. For most of us, it's not that way. We typically have to figure out like if it's a match and interview a lot of people and understand really what we need to build then afterwards. But let's figure out the product is legit and can serve a need.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I was indicating, you have to find someone where maybe trust is not that big of an issue. So who is like a person that you know, maybe from your network, that is working in a company that needs that or needs it themselves. So there's plenty of options. Because the one thing you don't have is trust. That's something you have to mitigate. And then after the first client, this becomes easier because then you could say, hey, we did that successfully with client number A. And I see a lot of like startups stretching what I feel is right at this point, just claiming thousands of clients, for example.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely a thing. And I guess everyone has to decide somehow how he works with that. But I think it's doable even without like stretching it too far. I mean, you are able to deliver. That's like what you are, what you have, what your confidence is, right? So you can provide a product. So you can talk with them about that. Hey, this is what we have. We want to do that with you, and then get it closer to them implementing. And I guess there's in a lot of scenarios, I mean, you could have the option to give it away for free for the first client. And I feel that's a controversial one because obviously it's easier than to get to the first client. But obviously if they don't see the value to pay you for that, it might create a problem because then they give you feedback, but they're not probably would be a client in the long run and you adapt the product to a wrong potential client. So there's a huge risk in like how you get to the first client. And I would typically do it in a way where you get something out of that, maybe not on a financial level. So maybe there's something that you can trade. Maybe they are willing to follow a very strict testing plan and provide feedback. Maybe they are giving you a video testimonial at the end. All these things that you can basically get from them that is very valuable for you at this point. And maybe even more valuable than just charging them something for it. If you can do both, I mean, great, do it. But yeah, this is like how you can try to get the first client and take this step. Because after that, you can start to formalize, find patterns and all this stuff. But getting to the first client is the challenge.
What I really liked is that you see sort of the sales and product very close to each other. Or at least that was my impression right now. So that sort of sales and basically product management or like how you develop your product should be pretty close to each other. Could you maybe elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so I guess there's two dimensions on how you could talk about that. So one thing is, I mean, basically sales is talking to clients, talking to potential clients, and they actually tell you what they need, right? So you have to tell product to develop that. So ideally, I mean, in some scenarios, for example, for Inospot, we had that combined like in one person to some degree. And that's obviously ideal if like the same person talks to the clients and then can right away implement a solution for that. That's perfect. Because if you like have a siloed approach and there are like people developing a product, they feel it could help someone. And then sales is always telling them, no, we actually have other news. We need something different. And that's a problem. So that needs to be some strong alignment, specifically in the early phase, where you have just founding team, and then typically talking about that a lot is helpful. The other dimension that I see is how do you keep sales and the product balanced, and that's specifically I would feel for companies that try to scale really fast. Could be an issue. So do you have an amazing product that basically sells itself? Then you need, or you can go through it with a weaker sales because the product is so great. If your, let's say, your product is mediocre, you need very strong sales to pull it off. And there are some interesting examples of companies, even very big companies, that have poor sales. I don't want to call names, but like, for example, platforms that are so strong that everyone needs to be on them. They don't need to do particularly a good job in sales because people are coming anyway because they have a very strong competitive advantage and USP. So in my opinion, like ideally you're somehow able to balance it. I guess that's not a lack of focus, but you can do two things at a great time: building a great product, but then also doing a good job in sales. And that's probably like the holy grail. If you pull it off in both dimensions, then you will be successful.
At the moment, you hear about a lot of people who actually turn it around a little bit and start with sales and then start building a product. What do you think about those approaches?
It's less risk because building a product first is a lot of risk that you've built the wrong product. So I feel if you can convince someone that you can basically cure their pain and provide something for their need, that's very valuable, and you will be faster because then you can make it very specific to what they need. If you have the capabilities, I would always probably go that route. Maybe you have a product idea of what you could do, but if you have the ability to convince someone that this actually helps, or another type of variation of that could actually help, and then build it afterwards, you will be much quicker in the first steps.
So basically going and talking to the customers as early as possible.
Yeah,
it's never wrong, right?
It's never wrong, and there's no way around it. Unless maybe the case you have 20 years of experience in the industry and can build something specifically to your experience and also know the people that you will sell it afterwards to. But even then, I mean, why not call them, ask them if they would like it, maybe sign a contract or something, and then quickly build it. At least for software, that's most of the time possible.
How would you do that? Selling something that you don't have?
Well, I mean, you don't need to deliver tomorrow. I mean, a lot of contracts, you can also do something where you co-develop with them maybe to their specific needs. Basically, it's more than maybe like a service project that you would do with them, like building a specific software, but being able to sell that software to other people as well afterwards. You could do something like that.
A good development partnership, something like that.
Yeah, like a partnership could be. I mean, some companies are using like these letter of intents. I don't have specific experience with that because I mean it's a very loose contract. Basically, like not gives you anything in the future, but at least you get some kind of commitment. But I feel in a lot of cases you can just draft a normal contract and say, hey, we are delivering there. Maybe put a clause in. If not, then yeah, you don't have to pay anything. But yeah, if we do, then this is the contract. Something like that. I mean, I guess in a lot of cases that can work.
And I mean, it gives you a really strong signal that there's actually somebody willing to pay money to solve this problem.
Yeah, right. Or I was talking just yesterday with a founder, and she said that there was a company that was interested in buying what they were just about to develop, and they even gave them like some hardware products to use for their development to come closer to that. And that was like a significant investment in providing these resources, and that's a strong signal.
Absolutely. And now let's say we've got this first customer. They're happy. What's my next step?
So you're finding more of those. I mean, obviously delivering, but if we stay in the realm of sales, it's finding more of them. And in the beginning, like you try out what works best. And the early phase where you don't have like a solid product market fit is really about testing and iterating a lot. I mean, you would typically probably go to some events that you could find some clients. You can reach out to them on some channels like LinkedIn. You can go to your network and ask. So there's a lot of variety of what you could do. And then you will feel, okay, there's something that starts to work where I can spark some interest and get some conversations going to start closing then the next few clients. It's a very messy or unstructured approach in that space, but I feel like for the time being, that's totally fine. You're trying then to structure it a little bit later if you like have some pattern of, I was able to sell this to 5 clients and they all look similar in terms of their, let's say, an ideal customer profile or buyer persona. I mean, that's something you need to think about, like who actually is this, and the more homogeneous this group is, the better, because then you know where they are, where you can find them, how you can target them, which wording you need to use, and all that. So this is like the early stage, I would say, to figure out who's actually the person that we are selling to, so in a company, and who's the company behind that, or what is the company behind that, to have a very solid understanding who that is, to then be able to do it in a more structured way.
And your suggestion how to find that out is just trying different stuff, going out there unstructured and trying to find the one path that helps you? Or would you sort of just start everything a little bit?
No, that's never a good idea. But I mean, you have probably a hypothesis about who's your seller, right? And you can start with that. Actually, write that down. What is the hypothesis about your customer? What is he, she, and the company? And then to try to evaluate that and validate that by talking 5 to 10 of those, or even more, depending on which space you're in, and trying to confirm that pattern. If you can, great. If not, then try to change it a little bit and validate another one. I guess there's not like a core recipe on maybe how many segments at the same time you can target or test. I mean, the less you need, the better, right? So starting like with one and then maybe at some point testing another core element, but keeping it simple and starting with one where you have the strongest hypothesis about and trying to confirm that hypothesis.
And if I'm in the founding team, who would be typically doing that? If no one from our team is experienced in sales so far, of course.
Well, so defining responsibilities is like crucial. From my experience with Inospot, we both, so two people founding team, we both didn't feel like we would be the one taking the sales hat and just grabbing it and then pushing through that. And as it's typically, if you don't have one person that's responsibility it is, then no one is responsible for it. And that's also what we had to realize at some point. Wow, like we're doing something in sales, but no one feels the responsibility to actually push through that. And after we changed that, we did make some progress in a very good direction. So the first thing is define who is taking over that part. And that's about like who actually thinks that he wants to do that and can do that, and talking to a lot of people, going out to events and all these things. So you need to be comfortable with that, or at least you need to be able to push yourself into these situations and then excel also there. So that's the one part of it. I think that in a very early phase, everyone should do it. So if we're talking like maybe pre-first client, very exploratory phase, then everyone from the team should talk to clients. I feel that's important. And then once you have the first direction that you can follow, then maybe limited to maybe one person doing that, while the other is building the product and something like that. So that would be like kind of my suggestion.
So that also solves the question for me. If nobody's sort of interested in it, how to find out who's the best, just start doing it again. Then you will see, okay, maybe I'm better than I thought at doing this. I can take over this role.
Yeah, right. And maybe, I mean, normally people haven't done it at some point. So how do you know? Like you just have like a feeling of what sales is, but never actually done it. And I wouldn't even see this at this stage as like being proper sales. It's basically finding people with a problem and trying to help solve that problem. And you can just take it as is. I mean, helps if you have a solid sales knowledge to make it in a very good way. But if you're looking for problems and solving them, that's one thing that you can do, and that basically everyone can do in the team.
And how would you go about that? What would be your first B2B SaaS move? to find those first persons?
Yeah, probably, as I said, like from your network. Like try to find the way where the trust barrier isn't there, and try to convince them that you can actually solve a problem, because it's important at this stage to figure out, like, is it actually a strong problem that we are solving? So do people really care about that, or is it just like somewhere down on their to-do list to care about fixing that? Because then you will have a hard time throughout your journey as a company. But if there's something people say, yeah, I want to have this solved and I'm willing to pay, you have to find these people to make it happen.
Okay, then let's jump a few months into the future. And now you have, I don't know, 3 to 5 good projects going, and you're thinking about, okay, how to get this whole sales thing into a structured approach.
Yeah. So there's a lot of aspects to it. I mean, typically, at the beginning, you as a founder probably have done it all, right? So you have moved through these stages. You have acquired some knowledge on how to do it, whom to sell to. And now it's like, how can I do more of that? How can we do that? And typically, what you realize, maybe at this point, maybe a bit later, is that you alone will not be able to do it, because, I mean, your time is limited. And if you like in 20 to 30 meetings with clients every week, there's probably, that's just a limit of what you can do to at some degree. So you have to figure out, how do you generate a support for that, and then transition more into the founder-led sales, from founder sales to founder-led sales. And the first thing that I would say is figure out what is repeatable and brings you the desired success. So what is a step that someone else could do, where you could provide a very precise explanation on how to do it, and then hire someone to do it? Most startups at this point I see, or not most, but a lot of them I see, making the move to hiring a very experienced person and basically asking them to figure it out in sales, because they have the knowledge, they can do sales. And they want them to take it over in their company, because they also want to move out of it very quickly, because they don't feel like they are the salesperson. So that's like the move that they would typically do. And this causes some problems, because they don't have the industry knowledge typically, or the product knowledge that you have combined from your early phase. They have maybe a different perception of the role that they would have, maybe just a leadership role, but they have to do it on their own. So that's why I would typically say, start from the bottom, basically, of the sales team hierarchy, and find the one thing that is very repeatable, that is easy to do, and then find someone and train someone. Typically for me, that would be like a sales development representative. So someone who does repeatable and very difficult things to get to meetings that you then as a founder can still close the deals. That would typically be my advice, starting from the ground up. And then you have multiple options from there. So the SDR, the sales development representative, they could move on to at some point closing the deals themselves. That would be ideal, because then they have a career progression and you can start hiring new SDR. Or basically, if that's not possible in that speed, then maybe hire an account executive who does the closing, and you move up leading this combination of SDR and account executive. So this is how I would build it from the ground up if you're trying to create a sales team, because then you at every point, you are the one having all the knowledge that you can share with them. It's not really about like knowing everything and being capable of doing everything, but more about guiding people into a structure that works. Because you have to give the advice. If you're hiring SDRs, I mean, there's not really such a thing as like crazily experienced SDRs, because that's a role that people only do for, let's say, 3 years and then move on. So you won't find like a 10 years experienced sales development representative, because there are none of those out there. And if they are, they're doing account executive roles and not SDRs. So figure out like the repetitive steps, like train an SDR to do that, and then move further through this progression.
But basically, if you think that sort of you're going to be able to not do sales quickly and remove yourself from the process, it's not a good idea.
Yeah, definitely not. And you will always be to some degree involved in sales, even if it's just maybe speaking on an event or maybe being involved in a deal with a very prestigious client or whatever it might be. But you will be part of it. But obviously, you have other things to do as well. So you're trying to let maybe 90% of the sales be done by someone else.
But sort of or at least I sometimes think that as I'm not experienced doing sales, I would be the wrong person to do it. But I think that's the wrong idea, right?
Yeah.
The person who knows the customer best is probably the person who at least should be really involved in the whole sales process.
I mean, if you, depending on your founding team, right? If you have a person in your founding team with like 10 years sales experience, perfect. Let them do the sales. But if you have not, and for a lot of teams, like founding companies out of university, for example, that's not the case. So, and everyone can learn it. Like it's not like crazy science, and everyone can do it if they want to do it. So you will need it not only in like your company foundation process, but you will always need it. So it does make sense to learn it.
And now let's look like another 3-4 years into the future. The company's like growing like hell. And everything's going really, really good. What would I be doing then as a founder in this whole sales process? You talked about conferences, or like what kind of deals would I still be involved to sort of also not lose the touch on the customer?
Well, I mean, like the last step probably in this progression would at some point be hiring a lead for the sales team, a head of sales, or however you want to call it, and then just guiding the strategic direction of that, like defining some priorities and things like that. So that would probably be then part of it. And then from the other part, basically at this point, you have the ability to pick a little bit of what you feel is like the important part, maybe also in a conversation with your sales lead to figure out, is it like going to a conference and like being very visible there? Some businesses don't require that, I feel. So you have to adapt then to where can you make that impact, or is it just that you maybe from time to time just book a meeting with a client to see like if anything changes, and that has an impact on like the trajectory of your company, so that you have to change some initiatives strategically to be able to address the need at some point in the future. I guess for all those that have access, I guess there's a masterclass from the Pepsi CEO, and she typically went also to the stores and took a look at how is the product presented, and like not to forget the touch, and then also talking to clients. I guess that's an important part, to not like guide a ship like clueless of where it needs to go, but sometimes get this connection again to what actually is going on.
And where does Koyos come into play now?
So let's say you start a company, and as you said at the beginning, you don't have a clue on how to actually do it, like from a methodical point of view. So how do you do good sales despite all this talking to people and understanding them? That's the first step, basically. So we have split like what we do in 2 training programs called boot camps. We have one about lead generation, and we have one about deal closing. So basically the first one, how do I get to people that want to talk to me? Like how's there a meeting that I can book? How can I do that? And then once I can book a meeting, then the second part, how do I close a deal coming from there with a complex organization, a big organization? So how do I do that? This is how we split into these 2 things. And typically we also address the roles that I were mentioning earlier. So for sales development representatives that do typically lead generation only, we have this first boot camp. And then for the second one, everyone who's transitioning into the account executive role and does not have like extensive sales experience already. So typically like our participants have like less than 4 years sales experience roughly. And then they basically get to know the best practices that currently work in other high growing organizations. And we have certain instructors that are working in other software companies, and they then take their best practices and showcase them and like provide an idea of how that looks like. And then this is an important part for me. So also taking it one step further. So actually the participants, they should start it and try it out during the sessions already, right? Because if it's just like a lecture on best practices, then afterwards you feel clueless on how to actually get it done and do it. And so, yeah, they need to do something during the sessions already to prepare something that they can immediately use after the session. That's an important part of the programs that we do.
And how much time do I have to spend in one of those boot camps?
So boot camps run 8 weeks, and it's only one session per week. So it's 90 minutes per week. So it's actually like on the job. It's easy to do. So you can actually do some proper sales throughout the week, and then get some fresh input on one of the afternoons during the week to do better sales next week.
Okay, so I have time to apply the learnings.
Right. Yeah, because so it's like one topic each. We have broken down like what you would typically need to do in these things into separate things. So you can go like one step. Let's say we're talking about cold calling. So how do I perform cold calls? You try that during the session. You get like a recipe on how to craft your cold call, and then you can go out during the next week, try that, improve the calls that you're doing, and try to see like how is it working and if you're getting like the proper results out of that.
Okay, then maybe let's talk a little bit about the lead generation part. Of course, don't share all the details, but
no, I don't know if we have time, but yeah.
Of course, it's not going to be possible. But sort of, what would you say is sort of the general roter Faden, in German, or what's sort of the general theme that you encounter when people start in your workshops? What are their problems? What are the most common problems, and how do you help them tackle?
Yeah. So, I mean, this is probably one of the most frustrating roles that you can have in a company. And I guess the first thing is to be aware of that. And let's say you are the first SDR in a company, then maybe there's not really a reference and you feel like, hey, what I'm doing is not working at all. So how is this possible? How is anyone else doing that? That might be the first thing, because in the end, you're doing a lot of things and a lot of the same things to eventually have a success. And there's a very good or interesting number to see that. So typically at the moment, you need like roughly in the 20 or 30 touch points. So points where someone is like hearing from you or getting a message from you to actually be able to close a deal. And that's
okay. Wow.
And that's went rapidly up like over the last 5 to 10 years, right? Yeah. So everyone is like bombarded through multiple channels, and doesn't really know like what's going on. And so let's say you're just starting in the role and you send out an email and don't get a response. You feel like, why is that? It's not working. So no one is replying to my emails. And actually, you typically have like maybe, let's say, a 2% response rate on an email, depending on like how you created that, on which scale and how personalized. But in the end, like your overall response rate or the ability to book meetings will be low. So people are more transitioning and they should like onto like a multi-channel approach. So they need to do something in a very cleverly combined way on multiple channels. And there's interesting ways of doing that. For example, let's say you send out an email and then you have the phone number and you call shortly afterwards, or you connect like an email that's been sent automatically together with reaching out on LinkedIn via a video message, something like that, which makes it somehow more interesting or more natural also for the recipient, because like a email cadence of 3 or 4 emails and the last 3 is just asking, did you see my last email, is probably not working, because there's not any value in that. But the better you're able to combine multiple things in a natural way of reaching out to people, then this will be very helpful. And this is what you have to do then on a repetitive level at scale, without like being very generic and losing people because you have no idea what they actually need.
And without losing hope.
And without,
because you're sending out 100 emails and probably...
without losing that. I mean, if we're talking about like what are goals, like, I mean, maybe it's just booking 10 meetings a month for a given industry. That could be the case. And for these, let's say 10 meetings, you've probably sent out like thousands of messages or did calls or whatever. So it's a very tough business, but I mean, you will have success if you just stick to it. So and try to improve that.
You told us earlier that you see the sales position also a little bit like a consulting position, and now you mentioned again that it's important to provide value. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Well, this specifically becomes important once you engage in the first conversations. So let's say you have a meeting booked and you're talking to them. I mean, it's completely valid, for example, to address in like a first call that you have, hey, my goal here is to help you be successful or solve a problem. If we figure out that you can do that with the problem that we have and can provide, it's great. If not, it's also fine for me. Because like going into this situation, not like I need to sell and I will sell you at any point, but creating an environment of I'm just here to support you through the process is something that really helps. And you have to imagine like the most people in like bigger organizations, they don't buy software every day, but you are selling software every day. So you are the expert on how this process can look like.
Like even internally on their side.
Right. Most people never have
procurement process knowledge. Yeah.
I mean, procurement, obviously, if you have a company with procurement buys all the time, but there's always someone else involved that actually needs the software. Yeah. And they are not buying something every day. Maybe it's just once a year or maybe the first time at all. And so you have more knowledge on how this can work out and what the problems will be also throughout that process. And basically by offering your support for them, of guiding them through this process and helping them to get your software if it's the right one, this is what creates the trust. And it's, I feel, much more consultative than this is the product, this is the features, you should buy it because it will help you. That's what I meant with being consultative more.
Do you also have a gatekeeper function so that you, as a person who's doing the sales, sort of tries to find out who's even the right customer for us? Like if our solution doesn't really fit, maybe this project is just not the right one even for your company to do.
Right. So that can be the case. So maybe because in the end maybe you're a great salesperson and you are able to sell, but then you cannot really deliver because they had different expectations. There's also something that you can use that for. And even maybe addressing that and saying that, hey, this first call is to figure out whether what we do is helpful for you and also for us if we could actually help you. This creates like this leveled playing field, not I need you to buy that. It's like a mutual thing. Like we are providing something that ideally helps you, but let's figure out together if that's the case or not.
And this relaxes me when I hear
this.
That's
good to hear,
because it feels like this whole approach takes out also the pressure out of the sales call. You can be, or I imagine that you can be much more natural. Just say, hey, okay, let's find out if there's a base to working together. And if there's none, okay.
Yeah, because there's not much more that you can do. And, and then you can address that because it creates trust and will help in the end to have a common understanding. Because you have like, if you typically have a first call, there's, I feel, like two extremes that you could face. Like one is a very experienced person that knows exactly what they want to buy and how they want the process to have. Sometimes that's the case, but more often than not, it's not. So typically they have no clue. Sometimes they're not even open to sharing some details on what they actually are looking for because they feel it's like the secret process of buying and they cannot give away information. And then you have have to provide the basis where they give you the information that is required. And you cannot just like have like, how do you say, like, it's not an interrogation. So you have to have a conversation about what they have. And let's say there is a client and they do not want to share any details. Well, it's fair to say, I'm trying to help you, but I can't if I don't understand like what you're doing. How can we figure this out, that you share what you need and then we see if we have that?
Let's talk a little bit about cold calling, the enemy of everyone who's starting sales probably. And also the enemy of many students who work in sales departments part-time and have to do cold calling. Is this also an approach that could help you there? Or how would you like start with cold calling? How would you,
Well, sure. I mean, the session probably, and Arto does our session, is probably the best person to talk to and how he does that. But it's the same. So, I mean, it's obvious if you call someone, they're not expecting that, right? And probably they, at this very moment, don't want to talk to you. So you have to find somehow like a entry into like what could be interesting for them. And if it's really a cold call, so no introduction maybe from another colleague, or so it's basically just a cold call, you somehow have to make it an interesting conversation, even if it's not relevant. And as you know, like, a lot of times it is not relevant for them. So you have to somehow create a basis where this also is fine. And there is, I feel, multiple ways of doing that. Like you could address that, hey, this is a cold call. This is a classic one. To just say, do you just want to hang up, or should we have a short conversation and then afterwards decide whether to move on or not? So that could be an easy way of doing that. But somehow, if you can, make it funny, because then at least they enjoy talking to you. And I remember like people cold calling me, or at some point not even cold calling anymore because they had a few conversations with me. But at least the conversation I knew was interesting. And maybe just a 2-minute call, I said, no, not at the moment. But the way they did it was interesting and like comforting. So not that you feel like, oh, this guy again, and I still have to push him away because he's like impolite, or that's the classic. I mean, people that after a cold call just hang up, I mean, from the caller side. So I call you, you say no, and then they just hang up. I mean, what if they need to call me again? So I'm obviously not in a good mood then to talk to them anyway. So it's about trust and in the first place, and not necessarily about closing everyone that you are calling, because you won't.
Yeah. Love this as well. Did you make any interesting experiences when you were building Inospot, or what were the mistakes that maybe you did as well?
Well, we did from in terms of building up the sales, we did what I just said. So being too quick on feeling that we can put sales completely in someone else's hand. That's one thing that we did. Not fully figuring out the early aspects of what is repeatable before giving it to someone else. So they had to figure out, and I feel if we would have done it, that would have been better in the first place. So that's definitely one thing. It's interesting because we talked about sales and marketing, and what we did was solely focusing on sales, basically. Because in the short term, marketing is not winning you any deals. So if I start with marketing today, probably I won't sell anything tomorrow. If I start with sales today, maybe not tomorrow, but maybe in a few weeks I can sell something. And marketing just takes so much more time. So the barrier of developing the first marketing things and initiatives is a bit higher. Specifically for us, we've been a bootstrapped startup, so there was always like a barrier to entry, like a proper marketing, although at some point we knew that could have been helpful. But there's businesses that react in a different way to that. And Inospot, for Inospot, it was probably okay that we did it like that. Maybe a bit of marketing would have been fine. But this is the way. Now with Koyos, for example, we try to do much more marketing because it's more suitable for our type of business model. In general. So you have to find like a common ground. But that's something that we learned there in terms of the progression into the sales space, how we did that, and then also on how to come up with the rest.
I mean, this is really interesting for me because I have a little video agency, and where would you say is sort of, where do you draw the line, or when does it start getting interesting for companies to start investing into marketing, and how does this whole process like tie into each other, like sales and marketing, and what maybe do sales teams need from the marketing side to be able to perform better?
So I would say the higher your average deal is that you close with a company, the less likely you need marketing. Not saying that it's not helpful, but you can get away with sales alone probably. The lower it is, you need basically marketing to pre-qualify people. So they need to be able to somewhat self-service and understand like what you have, it's the right thing, and then only reach out maybe to sign a contract if they can't do it on their own. So that would be like the first thing. And also like the level of trust needed is probably a thing. So for an agency that works from people to people, probably like building that basis with sales is helpful of doing that. But then at some point, I mean, if you want to cut something out of the sales, so maybe the pre-qualification, the meeting booking and move that to marketing can be a good idea if you are trying to scale or do more business, because you will be limited then with the sales aspects. But still, I feel most of the strongly growing companies, they have an outbound sales department reaching out actively to clients, because marketing can't do it all. For most companies, that's the case. If you are, unless you're comfortable with maybe tiny growth or something like that.
Yeah. So how I see this whole marketing game is to basically build up a layer of trust that then sales can build up upon. Would you say that's right? Because you were talking a lot about trust.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that with sales as well, but I mean, if there's a general awareness for your brand, that definitely helps, so that people know, that there's someone that I can call, and also the type of picture you are trying to create for your company. As you said earlier, like that you were feeling like with Koyos, we are more on the subtle level, for example, and not being like this. This is exactly how you do it, and buy it for now, and I teach you, and then you will be successful. Like that kind of way. So you're crafting a picture that is representing your brand and what you actually do.
Really, really interesting conversation. I think we already talked over 1 hour. So I think if people are interested in learning more, probably they will have to join one of your boot camps.
Sure,
I will have to probably. What would be the number one action that you recommend to our listeners if they want to start getting into sales, if they want to start dealing with this topic? What should they do?
Probably for most, it's losing the fear of not being capable of doing that, because in the end, it's just a conversation, and you can treat it as this conversation and then learn from conversation to conversation and being authentic doing that. So not trying to convey a picture that you're not are, because I mean, it should be an eye-level conversation in most cases. So you are not dependent on them to another level that they are dependent on you because they need a solution for something. So you should treat it like that, like a fair conversation at every point. And that, I feel, takes out a lot of pressure of actually doing that, because you're not pushing something into people that they don't need. And so losing that fear, trying it out, having conversations, and then trying to progress from there.
What would be your number one starting point for having such a conversation? I don't know, going to the front of the supermarket and selling, I don't know, whatever, or like how would you start getting into this a little bit to get into this mindset change?
Well, if you have a product for end consumers, I mean, why not just taking it out into the streets and asking some people about it? I mean, that's probably a good school of losing this barrier. I mean, you know, these fundraisers and all the other people that are doing that on the streets. So they probably are very good salespeople after a week because they are talking to a lot of people that are not interested and just want to get out of this situation that they sometimes feel awkward. So try to put it in and make it as convenient and fun as possible, and then try it out. I mean, that's something that works with end consumers, with businesses. I mean, you have to do it maybe in a more formal way. I guess trade fairs are a good way of doing that because people are approaching your booth. You can actively approach them, talk to them, just try to understand them, and tell them a bit about your solution. So that's something that is maybe more easy than, let's say, cold call.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Maybe we're going to see each other in one of the boot camps in a few weeks.
Yeah, maybe.
And thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
Spark is proudly presented by Ripple Film, storytelling for tech, B2B, and beyond.